to talk today about framing mental health and how we can approach mental health just a little bit different. That might be helpful to you. We use this term mental health, that phrase mental health, very freely. And what I hear a lot of is mental health issues. So I hear that term, that phrase, mental health issues. And I'm not really sure why we're using that. So the way that I want you to think about that is this way. We all have physical health. I don't think any of us would argue that we don't all have physical health because we all live in a body. We all have bodies, so we all have physical health. And we all have brains and minds, so we all have mental health. And I'm sure you would agree that we all have some sort of physical health issues, whether it's a injured knee or it's a shoulder that's really not working well, whether you're fit or not super fit. There are different health issues that we're all facing at every single point in time in our lives. And there's not very like anyone with perfect physical health. There's always something that happens. And often they can be situational. It can be there's an injury after an accident, or there's an injury because you fell off your bike, or you injure yourself at the gym. Something has happened and there's an injury that's situational. Mental health is really no different than physical health. So we all have like mental health issues in that we are dealing with different issues in our life that is situational. The problem with the way that we're talking about mental health and we're talking about mental health issues is that it seems to blur the lines with mental illness. And so people are saying, lots of people are saying, oh, I have depression, I have anxiety, which sounds like mental illness. There's a difference between mental health issues and mental illness. And somehow we've merged these in how we talk about things. Now, why is this a problem? You might be wondering why this is a problem. Because mental illness is categorized by three main things. So it's persistent, it's consistent, and it's prolonged. So it's there for long periods of time, it's pretty steady, and it doesn't really change or fluctuate. It is a really serious thing to be diagnosed with a mental illness. Typically involves a psychiatrist, there's medications, and it's something that doesn't change over time. So schizophrenia doesn't really change over time. Clinical depression doesn't really change over time, and it's not situational. Whereas what a lot of people are experiencing, whether it's stress or some feelings of sadness or feeling overwhelmed, these are situational. We are all in this really weird situation globally and in our communities where we're experiencing a lot of stress, a lot of things are happening that are beyond what we've ever done before. So we will feel symptoms of sadness and overwhelm and apathy and lack of motivation and lack of drive. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a mental illness. It's really important to talk about things around symptoms and what you're experiencing versus labeling them as depression. So, stress and depression can show up very similarly, but the difference is that stress ebbs and flows, and that you can have a really awful day where you don't want to get out of bed and you're feeling really lack of motivation and overwhelmed about life, and you just kind of decide to watch Netflix all day. But the next day, you wake up and you're like, oh, it's kind of all right. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to do the things. I'm going to get gas in my car. And I'm going to be able to do these things. That's the ebb and flow of mental health. No different than the ebb and flow of your physical health. That some days we have days where we feel really great in our bodies, and some days, depending on injury or situation or whatever's happening, we're actually not feeling that great in our bodies. Mental health is exactly the same way as physical health. It actually ebbs and flows, whereas mental illness doesn't actually shift and change. I really encourage you to start using descriptive words and talking about your mental health instead of using words like depression or anxiety. Because when you own an identity, there's really not a lot of room for movement. There's not a lot of room for days where you're feeling great or days where it's actually fluctuating just a little bit. And mental health is really dependent on situation. It depends on relationships. It depends on what's happening, like where you're living. It depends on your job. It depends on your friendships and family. It depends on what's happening in your life, the opportunities, lack of opportunities. There's all these pieces that are part of mental health in the same way that is part of physical health. And we can change some of these things in order to alleviate some of those symptoms. So I encourage you to really think about mental health in a very similar way you think of your physical health, in that we all have physical health issues and we're all dealing with mental health issues. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's stagnant and not necessarily moving, and it's not shifting over time, and that situations can actually either make your mental health better or make mental health worse in the same way that I can do with physical health. So there are lots of things that we can do. If you're on our page, you know we're constantly putting out things on ways to improve mental health or to facilitate some wellness around it, and that things can change based on situations. So I hope this encourages you to think a little bit differently about mental health and your mental health and how to engage in talking about the symptoms instead of labeling them as the terms that we typically use for mental illness, which isn't changing. I hope you have a great day.